I'm actually really happy we get to do this part because it's kind of the most fun part. So, who has questions for the dev? Anybody? Anybody want to?
Do it a second, Mike.
Maybe?
What I do it? As I say, oh, the other mic I think is on the table there. I just moved up the table so it wouldn't roll off.
Oh,
Okay, while we were moving them, because I wanted to think ahead and I thought the tech people would be upset if I destroyed their microphones.
Well, you know.
Yeah, you know. They get really touchy.
I'd love to answer any questions that you may have. Anybody? Oh, boy.
Get
Now I
out
have to
there.
pick.
You're gonna have to go out there.
Oh, I have to go.
Do you want me to walk around with the mic?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
I will walk around with the mic.
Jim's gonna walk
I'm
around
gonna walk
with
around
Mike.
with the mic. Hi, does anybody have any questions for our panelists? Got one, okay. Now I feel like Oprah or something.
What was your funnest game to work on?
That's good.
I've only worked on 2 games. I worked on Guild Wars 2 and Destiny 2, but I would say Guild Wars 2 because that's the one I got to like work as a creative and as a game designer and come up with like lots of clever and interesting ways to kill players, which is like the primary focus of what I was doing as a game designer was building creatures for the open world encounters, dungeons, raids, and that's where we got to have like a lot of fun as developers. And borrow a lot of like inspiration from like a lot of the raids and other games that we had played growing up.
This is before a lot of folks' times, but Baldur's Gate 2, and for a reason that I hope that most of you get to experience at some point, all of the technology worked, all the pipelines were laid down, everyone was experienced, and we could just focus on content, and we didn't have to we weren't adding very many features at all. So we made 240 hours of content in that game. And we could polish it as well because that's all we did. We added almost nothing feature-wise. And you may never experience that, but I hope you do because that's awesome. That's when development can be really fun.
That's insane. I'm jealous.
Most of the real fun ones are ones that are probably never going to see the light of day, so I can't talk too much about them. But the last project I was on before this one was an Unreal project, and it was my first like official tech design role. And so being in Unreal meant there was established pipelines for experimenting with new stuff, which as a tech designer was like a real sweet spot.
You and I need to stop sitting next to each other because we keep kind of stealing answers. So I don't have a specific game, but I think one of the times where I had the most fun in development was my last project, and it was when it was me and the combat designer, and we were brainstorming abilities and things that we could do with the character and the stuff we could come up with, and we were just having so much fun coming up with ideas and putting stuff into the engine and just trying it out. I think anytime that you're having fun working on it, that's usually a good sign that the thing that you're working on is feeling good. Like that's always a really positive sort of thing. And so anytime I feel that, I'm always like, oh my gosh. But yeah, working on combat for that game was a lot of fun. I cannot tell you what it is. I'm sorry, but I promise. It was fun, and you'll just have to trust me.
I also don't have that big of a roster of games, so I was like my own student projects, I guess. But in terms of my favorite thing that I worked on, in Destiny 2, I was able to have a lot of freedom in setting up these kind of like 5 puzzles that came out in the most recent expansion. And because I had so much freedom to really just like do whatever I wanted to do, I was able to do a lot of really fun, interesting things that hadn't been really done in Destiny very much. And so I think that was the most fun, to be able to explore like the bounds of what I was able to do within the limitations of the engine and the limitations of the project as well.
Thank you guys. Do you have questions?
Yeah. What did you learn from your first project?
That's a good one too.
First published project or first?
What you consider your first project?
I'll go with published project, I guess. I think when you're going into like from student projects into the industry, like the learning on how you're handling like big systems and like you go from like 5 people working on a project to like literally 1,000, transitioning from how much efficiency you really need to put into it and how much is available to you. It's a big change. So I learned a lot about like workflows and making those workflows really efficient for a lot of people versus just one other person. Yeah, that's all I got.
So my very first job out of like my schooling was actually working at like on casino games. And the reason why I mention that is like, I think, you know, when you're starting, when you're starting to like get a job working somewhere, if you're wanting to work at a studio, you know, you're not always going to be working on the things that you love the most. You may not always be working on like a game where you are like, this is my favorite kind of thing, I'm always wanting to do this. I learned at that place to kind of find the things to make it interesting, or like find what can I learn from this experience. So in that example, like I think the thing that I learned the most was kind of along those player psychology lines of like the things that you can do to motivate players to do things, and the responsibility that comes with that. Casino games are an extreme example of it, but like how to like, you know, lead with a carrot versus a stick, or that sort of thing. But yeah.
So my first like professional work in gaming was QA working on Pokemon Platinum. And I like suggested some text that was bugged and suggested the new text, and they went with it word for word. And it was sort of like a light bulb moment that like, hey, there's going to be potentially millions of people that are now going to read the text I just wrote. So the big thing I took from that is the work we do matters. Like, yes, we're making games, but it's things that will touch like millions of lives and will have ripples like long after we're gone, potentially. And so, you know, it's important work even though it is, you know, quote unquote, just games.
Biggest lesson I learned was keep it really simple. Keep everything you're working on really simple. The second you start overcomplicating it, it becomes complicated to build, it becomes complicated to like produce and track through the timelines. And sometimes what you think is best for the game actually isn't. If I can actually go back in time, I never would have proposed that we did 10-player raids in Guild Wars 2, which is like shocking. I would have actually gone all in on the 5-player content through Fractals, maybe made a raid version through that 5-player content, but what we did by adding a 10-player version was we fractured the player base. We took a 5-player game, and we suddenly made it a 10-player game.
I think for me it's to not be, as developers we tend to like set early rules for a game, and it could be I think designers, for example, generally work well within a creativity box, like here's your list of controls, here's your list of moves, now make this interesting in a bunch of different ways, and a level designer will take that and go crazy with it. But you have to always remember that it's your world and it's your rules, so you can change them. And I do find that we all will set these early things and they kind of become ossified and set in stone. And always ask yourself, like, is this rule still valid or is it time to break it? And that's a super valuable lesson. And it's hard to remember to ask yourself that. You get used to your own parameters.
I'll answer it. What the hell, I make video games too. I would say the biggest lesson that I probably like took away from my first big project was like consistency is key. And backing up Crystal's, simple is better. I found out the really hard way about, putting a bunch of different gameplay systems together that didn't really work very well, was just a nightmare, didn't read well, didn't play well. And it wasn't until I kind of like ripped all that out and kind of, started developing like something's an onion where you just add layers of polish and complexity onto it with something with a very solid base. Made my life easier and actually probably gave me more flexibility in the stuff that I wanted to put in the game.